Hey everyone, let's get the show started. Welcome to our DevOps office hours. It's June 22nd, 2022. My name's Eric Osterman, and I'll be leading the conversation. I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Posse. We're a DevOps accelerator, and that just means that we help companies own their infrastructure in record time by building it together with you while showing your teams the ropes. So if that sounds interesting, head over to cloudposse.com/quiz to get started. For those of you new to the call, the format's very informal. My goal is to get your questions answered. So feel free to unmute yourself at any time if you want to jump in and participate. If you're tuning in from our podcast or YouTube channel, you can register for these live and interactive sessions by heading over to cloudposse.com/office hours. Again, that's cloudposse.com/office hours. We host these calls every week. Our call today is recorded. We'll automatically post a video recording of the session today to our YouTube channel. So if you like it and want to support us, please hit those like and subscribe buttons. It helps us out a great deal. Just go to youtube.com/cloudposse. Again, youtube.com/cloudposse and vote and thumbs up us, thumbs up our video. All right. With that said, let's jump over into announcements. I got a few things that came across my news feed. I did not check the AWS feed today, so not sure if you have anything in there, Vlad, you'd like to add. If so, tee those up. So the first thing that came across my thing was Mercedes-Benz is apparently running 900 Kubernetes clusters. This is like where a new metric needs to be. What is the Kubernetes cluster per capita at your company? It's almost like they're giving every engineer at the company a cluster. So their justification is, well, it's easy enough to spin them up if you have the automation around it, and that the ability to restrict product teams and divisions in the company to have access, the access that they need was too cumbersome, using things like OpenShift or some of the other layers on top of Kubernetes. So let's just, solve it by throwing in more Kubernetes clusters. 900 sounds like a lot, maybe a smaller number, but I get where they're coming at. It's like some companies, giving every single engineer their own AWS account or giving every single service its own AWS account. Hey, it works for some if you can automate around it. Any other takeaways from this?
It says they're on-prem too.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. All right. Next announcement is from Terraform Cloud. Looks like they've finally added drift detection. They've done it in a way that appears similar to me from how Spacelift has been operating. Basically, it will periodically or continuously, however you set your schedule, run plans against your Terraform infrastructure. And when the plan doesn't match what you have in your version control, then it will alert you to that. It supports different ways of surfacing it clearly. It will show it in the UI, as well as it supports integrations via webhook, email, and Slack notifications. I think this is pretty nice. The sooner you are notified of drift, the sooner you can understand why drift happened. Ah, crap, I didn't realize my change to the remote state would affect this other component. Or permadrift in your Terraform modules is a thing. There are certain, arguably considered bugs in Terraform providers where, two consecutive plans and applies will not be idempotent, even if nothing changed. Having drift detection in place will help you discover those things sooner so you can fix them. Obviously, there are lots of other use cases for drift detection. Somebody applied the Terraform code locally, forgot to commit it up, or the pull request was never merged and confirmed through Terraform Cloud. Somebody went into AWS or whatever provider you're using and did some manual ClickOp remediations and, either benignly or innocently did that and forgot to commit that back to version control, or less innocently, you've been hacked and you can more easily detect it. Now, this drift detection is not the same kind of drift detection that you get with tools like driftctl, driftctl is solving a much harder problem, actually. How do you reconcile what you have in AWS or your cloud provider, whichever ones it supports quite a few now, versus what you have in your Terraform code? So this will help you find orphaned resources or things not under management. Now, I think it's a holy mission that they're on trying to do with driftctl, but there will always be so much noise because you will never have 100% coverage, because sometimes you have resources generating resources. If you're using Kubernetes, under the hood is going to be provisioning load balancers and other AWS resources. So you will get drift. Therefore, in my mind, this is the low-hanging fruit for drift detection. If you're using Terraform Cloud, you should check this out. Anything to add to this?
Sounds awesome.
Yeah, and I'm excited about that for Terraform Cloud. The other interesting announcement that I just saw a second ago, and I was surprised that it's gotten to this point. So Waypoint was a project announced at HashiConf last year sometime, and in my opinion, they kind of bungled the announcement, because like it left everyone like, what is Waypoint? It's for developers, but it's not for developers. It's for CI, but it's not CI. It's for deployments, but it's not for deployments. If you recall, on office hours at the beginning of this year, I believe we had Taylor Dolezal presenting on Waypoint and giving a more interactive demo to everyone here. And it seems to be in a popular category now. I don't know. I'm likening it to something more akin to Earthly, which is another service now trying to abstract away generally what you do in CI and CD in a way that you can run it locally. You can run it in a CI agnostic, CD agnostic manner, so that whether you're on Circle CI, GitHub Actions, Jenkins, or just developing locally, you get the same experience. So in a nutshell, Waypoint is trying to simplify that overall experience from the developer to the build, deploy, and release lifecycle process. This Waypoint thing really demos pretty well. If you see it, it's pretty awesome, especially for building up small ephemeral environments. But every demo I've seen seems like it's really cool, but it's not quite there yet, not ready for mainstream. So the fact that they're coming into a private beta for a managed version of the Waypoint service itself is an exciting milestone. Has anybody been following this more closely than I have?
I have kind of like, it's interesting, and Waypoint does have a web server that you can run that gives you pretty dashboards and like pretty flowcharts of your steps and builds and jobs and things like that. I imagine that's what they're gonna be offering. I haven't looked into it.
Yeah,
but
yeah, it is that web service that they're going to be offering, so you can just
I've been
focus on the client side.
keeping up to date with it, but not so much. I like it. I think it's an awesome approach, but it's like Terraform 0.1.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Like it can be,
but with all the learnings of having done Terraform already, kind
yeah. So,
so
like
moving faster.
I'm excited for it, but it needs a lot more integrations and a lot more support. We'll see.
The other curious thing about this thing called Waypoint is, and this might have changed, but when it came out, it was kind of like a double-edged sword for me. Cloud Posse, we are all about giving companies patterns and techniques for using Terraform at scale. And, HashiCorp as a company has been very vague on what are the actual best practices for doing large-scale Terraform. Anybody who does large-scale Terraform knows that, well, Terraform by itself is not the tool. That's why there's a plethora of these other wrappers, things like Terragrunt, Atmos, oh, I'm drawing a blank here. The space one, TerraSpace, and others. Terramate is a new one. Yeah. So I thought Waypoint was finally going to be HashiCorp's like, hey, this is how you're supposed to do Terraform. And it wasn't that. And ironically, the examples they had did not show how to use Waypoint with Terraform, and yet Terraform is the one thing that really needs something like a Waypoint for how to do build, deploy, test, build, deploy, release, right? And yet it's not Terraform Cloud either. So like reconciling Waypoint with Terraform Cloud with this other service, and that infrastructure is not allowed to be part of your application build, deploy, release, that's an incongruence to me. I think people want them to be the same part of the same thing, which is why I think Pulumi is, attracting a lot of people. Okay, the next announcement was something RB on the team just dropped by. So I've seen HCL or TF edit before, but what's interesting about this is that they show a very practical use case. If any of you have been going through the upgrade process for the AWS Terraform provider AWS V4 upgrade from V3, there were some major breaking changes there. They rolled them back pretty quickly because of the tremendous collateral damage it caused. But nonetheless, in the, I believe they just pushed it forward to V5 of the AWS provider. That's going to be then for real. So if you haven't been taking steps to upgrade or prepare for this upgrade, watch out. So Mina Mijoyo, he is a prolific contributor of tools for Terraformers. He has tons of things: TF Migrate, TF Update, HCL Edit, and so forth. What's interesting about this is that this is a companion tool to his other tool for doing migrations. So he has a tool for actually doing Terraform migrations. Now, this is very different, of course, from the built-in migration concept in Terraform 1.1, I believe. And what makes this one different is that the scope is much greater. It can handle more complex types of migration operations that you cannot do in the native Terraform migrate blocks. So in this model, you can he can help you refactor your, or the tool TF Edit can help you refactor your configurations and then create a migration plan that you can then execute as part of your CI and CD process. Any thoughts on this one? And it looks like it does not support yet dynamic blocks inside of your S3 bucket resource.
I'll definitely have a look. So I'm going to be doing that pretty soon on one project.
Yeah, this is especially a big deal if you're running like hundreds of buckets, which is not uncommon in enterprise environments. So. Let's see. The next one is, for those of you who were online on June 21st, you realized that the internet crashed, aka Cloudflare was down for 4 hours, taking down, a huge swath of sites that sit behind it. Now, it was only 19 of their hops, their data centers that were down, but those were the most, the busiest data centers. So it affected, everything from blockchain companies down to mom and pop e-commerce sites. Now, this stemmed from a mix-up when they redeployed some changes to their BGP routing. Some routes were withdrawn, and that caused the outage. And that meant they also couldn't even access those systems very easily. They had contingencies in place. They had other ways to access those data centers, and they were able to roll it back, but it still took a while. So yeah, that's the dip in their traffic, 50%, looks like, if this is linear. All right. And the last one was just a small little notification that, the registry was down. Fortunately, it was only for 25 minutes or so, but for anyone doing Terraform, that could have been disruptive. Time for a coffee break. Any other announcements, Vlad or others? Checking here.
Nothing of like major interest that I would bring up.
Yeah.
Like, there's a new AWS billing page. Aurora supports Postgres 14 13 or something, like the next major version. Bottle Rocket support launched a version of DOS with NVIDIA support, which it's
Mm,
awesome, but for a
for the
tiny,
GPUs.
tiny sliver of people.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
Oh, just to clear up one thing, Zach Lober, you were asking if Waypoint is like Tailscale. I think you're thinking of the other HashiCorp product, which was called Boundary. Boundary is their zero trust remote access system that would be in competition to Tailscale.
Oh, Tailscale announced SSH support today.
Oh, really? That's cool. That's interesting. Yeah, I've yet to check them out. Originally, I was really
Is
excited
anyone
about
actually
it.
using that though? Like either of the products? I've never, like, I don't know anyone using Waypoint or their Boundary product. I hear a lot about it.
Yeah, I think to Vlad's earlier point, they're just not. I mean, they are like Terraform 0. Terraform 0.2 or something. They are very early in their development and not yet ready for mass adoption and prime time, in my opinion.
We know how long it took them to get Terraform to 1.0. So
Exactly, right. And we're still having to undergo massive refactoring and efforts around that. Now, I guess with things like Boundary and Waypoint, well, Waypoint, since it's a TSL, it's going to have probably a lot more volatility, just like Terraform. But I'm guessing Boundary will be more stable in terms of breaking changes, since it's just a simple.
probably better
Simple load.
integrations with their, Vault product and things like that will
Yeah.
drive that adoption in those enterprises.
Oh, and Dagger was the other tool I was thinking of, that by the founder of Docker back in the day. He's come out with this new framework. It also reminds me of Earthly. So I feel like Earthly, Dagger, and Waypoint are in some new category that's coming out.
Wave of the future.
Or the past. I mean, I feel like Waypoint is also reminiscent of Chef Habitat, if you remember that one.
Yeah.
Or maybe Docker Compose is another analogy.
Okay,
There's
yeah.
right because
It is a
like
gaping sort of hole in developer experiences. Everyone loves Docker Compose, but it's really not a Kubernetes tool, so.
right. So I think Waypoint is trying to bridge that by offering a form of generic to specify like what the stack looks like, right? At the application level. And it's been tried before, and I feel like it's closer than other attempts, but I think it's still in the same kind of it's an incremental improvement as opposed to something that's going to be revolutionary. And the trouble that what its competition is bespoke CI/CD deployments, right? That's
Which
the
is another
competition.
trend I see, that there are more and more bespoke kind of CI/CD like platforms targeting different groups. Like Xcode just came out with their CI/CD platform. There's, arguably you could say things like Airflow are a little bit like that, but for ML and data.
I'm on a
ops.
hunt to find the project that, where I work with the largest number of like base config files sitting at the repo for all the various integrations and bits in their pipelines.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. With your package.jsons and your Docker composes and then your Docker file and then your K8s manifest and then
Your Sonar Cube, your linting.
Oh yeah, your linters. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Yeah. Matt Gowie, I just saw your message there on Tailscale. I know you were a really early adopter, kicked the tires on it. Just going back briefly to that. Oh, so this was one of those things I was curious. So they have gone through a SOC 2 now audit, which was like one of the big things preventing companies from adopting them.
Yeah, it took them 1.5 years. That when I picked them up, they were like super early. I feel like it wasn't their beta, but it was, hey, we just made this thing, check it out. But it's very cool. And I feel like, Vlad just asked any reason you went for Tailscale instead of Teleport. Teleport and all the other options, they seem more heavyweight. Tailscale is like as lean as it gets. It's like, just deploy this single thing inside of your VPC, and then you get a WireGuard connection into your private network, and with DNS support and all this fun stuff. So I feel like it's I don't know. Like I said, I implemented StrongDM instead. And while I like StrongDM and I'm a fan, much more expensive and much more, I feel like it's more enterprisey in that you have this higher level of RBAC controls and management of the actual resources you're connecting to. Tailscale is like at a lower level where you're just like, hey, now I have access to that network. Instead of, hey, I have access to this set of resources that is made available to me. And I think that's where are you at in your company journey? Like, do you care about deep RBAC, or do you care about, just getting your devs access to those private resources that they need access to do their jobs? That's the way I look at it.
That's helpful. Yeah, just to chime in there. So Teleport is awesome and historically has been incredibly painful to deploy, as are most security oriented products. And because they're very difficult to automate because it's all based on trust and certificates and running a bunch of CLI commands. So automating it was a pain. Now with Teleport Cloud, I suspect that it's a whole lot easier and closer to deploying something like StrongDM or Zscaler. Possibly Tailscale, but to your point, Matt, like Tailscale stood out as just being the simplest way to get up and running for smaller companies that can get away with a flatter network architecture. All right. So any other announcements here? Headscale. What is Headscale? An open source self-hosted implementation of Tailscale control server. Interesting.
For the control freaks,
Yeah. Well, especially when you get into security, I could see that would be a no-go for many. So Eric Berg, are you on the call?
Yeah, I am.
Oh, awesome. So I just wanted to get to your question pretty quickly. You were asking today earlier about, so what are really the benefits of going with Terraform Cloud versus using your own S3 backend? And I saw the thread here. Let me jump in. Oh, sorry. I thought it was you, Eric, but it was Oliver. Sorry, I got my wires crossed. Oliver, you were asking about not finding any.
Yeah, someone else has the same question.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know that's a problem I've had recently.
Sorry. Yeah. Brain farts here, nutty professor. So you're not finding any info on the web that clearly identifies the gains of going with Terraform Cloud for the backend specifically versus using AWS S3 backends, other than you get a nice GUI if you use Terraform Cloud, and you don't have to manage your own AWS resources regarding the state storage backend itself. So, but if a team already has Terraform state storage in S3 and some simple tooling to create associated buckets and so forth, because you are using the Cloud Posse TF state backend module, right? Then why do you need to use Terraform Cloud? Because it makes you just more dependent on this third party to keep your states. So yeah, it seems like a pretty major con, and that is my position. So there is a very clear benefit to using the Terraform Cloud state backend, and playing devil's advocate here just momentarily. So one of the biggest pain in the butt for using Terraform as a newcomer is this stupid thing called the backend, where you have to configure it and set it up. And if you're using the S3 as a backend, well, what creates that backend? You could use something like TerraGrunt, which does it for you. But wait, I thought we were practicing infrastructure as code. Terraform creating that S3 bucket is not doing that. So then we go, then because we're purists, we Terraform it out like Cloud Posse does. but Terraform doesn't really support easily creating those Terraform state backends and then importing your state into it. So, so this was one of the things that Terraform Cloud solved just by having an account and logging in with that. Your Terraform could now automatically set up the backend and it's managed there. Okay, so that's one benefit: easier state backend creation. Only a cold start problem and can be mitigated in other ways. The other thing is that Terraform Cloud itself, I believe, has this pretty interesting. Well, I know it has this feature. I believe this feature requires having your state managed by Terraform Cloud. And what that feature is that you can do remote runs of Terraform code in Terraform Cloud. Thereby, your team never even needs access to the cloud providers or multiple cloud providers. Your secrets can just be stored in the cloud. Your secrets can be stored in Terraform Cloud itself. And you can now use a policy-based approach on what people can do, which is slightly different than I know IAM policies are policies, but this is more like saying like this person can create this subset of resources and even create IAM policies, but you can have now Sentinel policies restrict the extent to what they could do with those things. That
Would you-
requires
those are
I believe, Terraform Cloud
policies-
Settings.
Are those policies on the Terraform Cloud side, or are they?
Yes, on the Terraform
Yeah,
Cloud
okay, got
side.
it.
Well, they are managed by Sentinel policies, which are policies as code, which can be managed through GitOps and all of that other stuff. And then the enforcer of those policies is Terraform Cloud.
Interesting.
So this is one of those things where I think it's high level. I like it conceptually, and I would like to try it out with a customer as the primary way of giving developers access for doing Terraform. To date, that is not the reality. To date, what we tend to gravitate towards is giving developers admin access to a sandbox account where they can do and test their development. I think it would be interesting to see if this could be an alternative to that sandbox approach. Any other suggestions on why using Terraform Cloud would be better than S3 backends?
Do you want to say anything about space lifts? I mean, I've got my own issues with space lifts in provided state stuff. Primarily,
Okay, well,
you can't get to it from outside a space lift.
yeah. Okay, that's a good point too. Yeah. So just one more thought on that, which is a perfect segue into what you said, Eric, and is something you mentioned, Oliver, is like, wait, so if your Terraform state is in Terraform Cloud and Terraform Cloud is not accessible, you're pretty hosed, you're locked into that. So for that reason, we have taken a hardline stance that we are still using S3 as the backend everywhere. Obviously S3 could go down, but Amazon has a pretty good track record, all in all, I must say, about keeping S3 available. There have been some 1 or 2 catastrophic outages, but we're past those. So I like the break glass. So if you are, if you need to do Terraform and the mini cloud provider you're using, be it HashiCorp Cloud or Spacelift is down, you can still do it manually. And I think that is good for the business. As it relates to Spacelift's backend, yeah. So Spacelift, so these days, almost every taco provider, the Terraform automation and collaboration software, we're talking Terraform Cloud, Scalar, M0, and Spacelift. I don't know about M0 specifically. I have to imagine they provide it as well, because all the other examples I brought up support it, have their own managed backend. And I think they all have that same liability. They don't have a proven track record of Amazon for keeping services online. Eric?
Yeah, I also made that decision. I tried I tried a bunch of stacks in Spacelift using their state, but then it's not accessible. If you ever have to do stuff, you have to mess with things. You've got to
State manipulations.
Yeah. Then,
it's a real big piece of mind being able to go into S3 and literally copy, edit, re-upload a state file if you need to, or revert versions of it.
Yeah, well, that was a great use for a task. Terraform state pull S3, copy it to some bucket where I was like, okay, I'm gonna push this state now like to my bucket. It's cool, like I can get to it again. I felt removed from my state.
It was all you're in a better state of mind right now.
So the push and pull commands don't work with those Taco.
Not from nothing works outside of Spacelift. Like I'm happy to have somebody else manage the state. That was a point where I was like, all right, you guys promise you're going to manage the state. That's one less thing I have to think about. Plus, developers getting states dirty. If it's tied to a stack, it'll be a little easier.
So, but just to clarify, the pull commands for the state did not work from Spacelift. You could
So
not.
they all work in space. But what
within,
I do is
within the
pull it.
Spacelift wall garden, like within a Spacelift runner environment.
A task specifically.
Yeah,
I
it's-
ran a
okay, yes,
task
yes.
that
Mhm.
pulled it, and then S3 copied it to a bucket I could get to. And then I pulled that and then copied that and pushed that to the new state with the bucket.
Yeah, so you hacked yourself, basically.
Yeah, but you can't, yeah, I had to, so that I could do other hackery in the future.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Was that clear? Oliver?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, keep your state in S3.
Yeah, or basically some generic backend. Just don't use etcd because they just deprecated it. Don't use Artifactory, they just deprecated it. But yeah, S3 is not a bad choice. All right, so one question from Venkata was asked earlier this week. I think most of the answers were posted in the channel. So I can't really add too much more to it right now. If Matt Calhoun was here, he would share some more because he's done a lot of work with this. But this netbox looks really nice for what it is. So anyone have any recommendations for IPAM alternatives that are not cloud specific, basically a cloud agnostic way of managing large scale IP networks?
You mean aside from Google spreadsheets, right?
Yeah, exactly. And implementing your own functions for that. IPAM is really nice. We've started, we're in the early stages of adopting IPAM for AWS, but it's obviously more AWS specific. It's honestly not restricted to AWS, but the fact that it's run inside of AWS kind of makes it feel that way. And if you want to have something that is broader, I understand it. Netbox was a solution by or is it DigitalOcean, I believe, that they open source, which was it looks very fancy as a way of managing your network blocks. I saw screenshots here somewhere. Yeah. So unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on you look at, not problems I've had to solve hands-on.
What's the scale at which you start having to use IPAM?
I would say, as soon as you're managing probably more than 24 subnets and want to start growing beyond that, especially if you're starting to integrate with other networks and you also don't know how large your network needs to be in any one VPC or account. So with IPAM, you can basically just start requesting CIDR blocks from a pool, and you offload all that management to IPAM. So you can think just more about like, I need a /22 or I need a /24. You don't have to think about how it fits into the bigger picture of everything.
Got it. That makes sense. And you put a hard number on it. So that's what I was looking for.
Yeah. And in our engagements, we by default, we almost always provision, 12 to 18 different accounts, and we easily have, and those accounts will often have clusters or VPCs in multiple regions, and you'll have public subnets for like your load balancers and private subnets, for example, for your EKS pods. And then, well, some customers now, they want a data plane, right? So how do you then manage the subnets for those? And it quickly becomes just a major PIA pain in the ass for most people working with us who don't do CIDR math day in, day out and think about networks day in, day out. So if we could just think about like, well, how many IPs do you need? That makes it a much easier problem to solve. So I think it's going to be our standard recommendation. All right. But then that's the other thing. There's still an architecture to using IPAM. And it's kind of like, because you can, I forget the specific terminology here, but you can have basically IPAM can be hierarchical, and you only, and then you request subnets from as a resource from a pool, but you probably want to have an architecture to how you organize your pools, especially if you want to be able to say that one pool is in a certain perhaps geographic region, or one pool is designated for an organizational unit. And this comes down to how you are going to be setting up your routing across cloud providers or like with your data center, because it's very nice to be able to just route a specific net mask over to, or subnet mask over to a given transit gateway. Okay, next question. How does everyone handle, okay, I think we actually talked about this last week, didn't we? Database refreshes from prod to lower environments. Yeah, we talked about this last week, basically. How do you also scrub that data after it exits prod and before it enters into lower environments, and how do you refresh those lower environments? So we'll skip that one since we talked about that.
Eric, did we ever talk about the GitOps developer experience with Matt on the call?
No, but oh man, we actually have the whole crew here today. It's been really hard to get Matt Gowie and Vlad and myself, and Jim probably has an opinion on too, all on the same call. You'll remember like 2 months ago, we talked about the GitOps developer experience. Do you want to talk about that today, Matt?
I almost forgot, or I kind of do forget what it was. It was something Vlad said in the comments while we were going about some conversation that made me think like, oh, that'd be a great conversation. I think maybe you were, Vlad, you might have been railing against the developer experience with GitOps. Whereas I feel like I don't know.
That sounds like a probability, because I don't like the GitOps developer experience. I think it's horrible and a step back for developers. And it's a big reason why I advise customers not to do anything with GitOps right now.
Really?
So,
okay, I want to hear this.
Yeah. Now we got to go down.
Okay, okay. You opened the Pandora's box, Vlad. But I know you're good for standing up
I'm
for.
Wrong. I'm not working with huge Uber-sized and Uber-sized enterprises, so on and so forth. Insert all disclaimers here. But we went from a debatably very nice developer experience and interface for deployments and for infrastructure as code. The easiest example that everybody knows is Atlantis for Terraform. Like, if you go to run Atlantis.io right now, their homepage is awesome because it shows exactly what's happening. A developer is in GitHub, they comment something on the GitHub PR, they get the output right there, and they take some action. It's all awesome, it's all integrated, it's super verbose, it's extremely clear what's happening, both to newbies and experts. It's awesome. And now we're moving to GitOps because, yes, Git is everything, and I'm not going to go into the whole rant, but we moved to worse developer experiences. What I mean by that is there are two main options for doing GitOps, and both are terrible in different ways, which is an accomplishment, good job off. So first up, we have Flux. Flux gives you, excuse my language here, but a shitty green checkbox on a commit, which is utterly useless unless you have a team that already understands Flux and Kubernetes and the Kubernetes reconciliation loop in detail. Like, it doesn't give developers a good experience. It's a useless and it's a developer hostile way of doing things. I don't like it at all. On the other hand, we have Argo, which takes it a step further in that there aren't that many details in GitHub, and you have to go into a debatably gorgeous UI with flowcharts and things and steps and stages. But it's another UI. Like the whole goddamn point was to stay in Git, stay in GitHub, stay where developers are doing. And I see the current implementation of GitOps be a massive step back. There are many other things that are great with GitOps, don't get me wrong. But in my mind, the developer experience has went down a lot.
I agree with many of those points, and I think in an ideal world you wouldn't have to jump into another dashboard. In an ideal world, you see the information you need to see exactly where you need to see it. One of the things I really love with some of the GitHub actions, I forget what the term is, but your action can actually comment on the line of code and give the context of what's wrong with that line of code. And we don't see that, which is a great developer experience, but we never see that with any of these kind of GitOps solutions. Like they're not telling me where my code may cause that Terraform to screw up or not work. So that's that. Anybody working with GitLab more? I don't do much with it. I see two major camps of companies out there. They're the ones that have gone all in on GitHub, and as are most of all our customers, because we screen on that. And then the other is GitLab. And people who use GitLab are diehard for GitLab pipelines. And GitLab has invested a lot, branding and otherwise, in adopting GitOps as a methodology. Also for Terraform. Also, GitLab has its own state backend, tying it into our previous conversation. Anybody really happy and a big advocate of what GitLab is doing for GitOps?
We adopted GitLab when it was really early, but it didn't have all the features that we needed, and we moved away from it. But that was 2 years ago, and since 2 years, I've gone back and looked at GitLab, and it's actually matured like tremendously from when we first started using it. So we don't use it now, though.
Yeah.
Kind of same for my client, a large GitLab deployment, but they're not using it for any of the Cube integration stuff. They have their own GitOps path for that they've developed. So that doesn't include any of the GitLab feature functionality, even though it's ubiquitous across the organization. So.
And I guess there's always Azure DevOps. Anyone?
That's what we actually went to, was Azure DevOps, and that's only because we're using .NET applications and all that, and it was. Plus, our VP is a Mr. Windows, so everything is Microsoft. I've tried to talk him out of it. I've even tried to move to GitHub because they're going to sunset it at some point anyway, and he refuses to listen. So
interesting. But this reminds me of one other point that we missed. So there's obviously optimizing the developer experience and helping the developer move faster and understand exactly what's wrong with what they worked on or the impact of their change. But then there's also knowing, or giving the project managers the understanding of, is this done? Has this been deployed? Is it in every environment? Was it only deployed to dev? Has it gone to dev, staging, and prod? And that's, I think, one of the areas, obviously, Azure DevOps has focused on. Jira is trying to do it with their deployments tab in Jira, but I'm always confused with that tab, to be honest, and haven't totally embraced it.
Do you mean Bitbucket pipelines, Eric, or?
No. So here's another trend we're seeing. So Datadog is now supporting generic metrics or telemetry and reporting for any CI platform. Kind of cool. As is Jira trying to do the same thing around deployments, and not just Bitbucket, but that GitHub exposes a deployments API, and Jira is now ingesting that, or can ingest that.
Deployment visibility and release management are a whole different subject. And I also dislike the GitOps and service mesh trend of shoving deploys at the network level. I think that is a massive step back. yes, if you gotta migrate Redis cluster live and you have 50,000 Redis caches and you're doing enterprise stuff, definitely do deploy at network level. For everybody else, doing deploys at the network level is doing the dumbest possible implementation of feature flags. So one of the big draws for any service mesh ingress controller, whatever, is, oh my God, you can do stagger rollouts and A/B testing and la di da di da on a random percent of requests. It doesn't matter. It's a random, say, 10% of requests. If that 10% is a really big cranky customer that is threatening to cancel because their requests are failing, that's horrible. If that 10% is one of your salespeople in a demo at a big conference, that's horrible. Like, there is absolutely no way to properly target how you're doing deploys by doing these deploys at the network level. And that's a very worrying trend for me because again, we have better ways of doing it. We have feature flags. They matured immensely. They're very well known. And shoving logic at the network level not only makes deploys worse, it also very much hurts visibility. It's extremely easy for a whole company, note here the whole company, not just the whole developer department, to go into LaunchDarkly or Optimizely or what was it, Split.io or whatever provider and see what's deployed because it's a feature flag. Every deploy is a rolling deploy that happens ASAP within your limits of how much traffic can be disturbed and stateful connections and all that. And then everybody can see exactly where we are with the feature flagging. Like we flip 10% of customers. We flip customer A, but not customer B. We flip Bob because Bob from company Z wanted to see that feature. That's not something you can get with deploys at a GitOps level or service mesh level. It's
That's
a
true.
step back that, and this
Yeah.
was and still is, again, a legitimate requirement if you're doing massive Redis cache deployments and you need to manipulate network traffic to do the deploys. But that is excessively rare. And getting a lot of the GitOps and service meshes providers that are doing that for big enterprises and they're coming for big enterprises and they're used by big enterprises and them advocating that everybody should do that is gross negligence.
All right. Anyone have something to add to that? I thought it was really interesting.
Sorry if I was too pessimistic.
No, I mean, I identify with a lot of those. I feel like trying to solve all of this at the mesh layer, which while it's been very successful for companies doing it, it just feels so overly complicated for doing that.
So, question for Vlad: do you have, like, if I'm a project manager, I just want to see in one view what version of software is running in each stage? Do you have a way I can see that, or a way that you would recommend implementing that?
LaunchDarkly. That's it. You can see what version is deployed everywhere. Non-technical person. So we need, and they're much smarter people than me have written a lot on this. We need to separate the concept of deploy with the concept of a release. So deploy is when you actually replace the binary container, serverless function definition, whatever. That should have very, very, very low impact. I don't want to say zero impact because there is some impact, like you're breaking connections and things like that. There are workarounds. I'm not going to get into that. But it should be an non-event. It shouldn't be exciting. They should happen as often as possible. Now, releases where we actually enable new behavior, those are risky. Those are problematic. And those are the things that should be very easily controlled, very easily rolled back, and with high visibility. If you're using any type of service of feature flagging provider, I like LaunchDarkly. You can very easily see in their their dashboard, in their metrics, in their feature flag flipping thing, exactly who's using it and what percent of customers are using it, and you can get fancy alerts that hey, you flipped everybody off. a week has passed with no incidents, maybe you want to remove that feature flag and things like that. It's way easier. And a lot of people also integrate that with their observability providers if they're not using cheap observability providers that limit tags and cardinality. With like, oh, customer Z just did the request and they're on version 1.5.22 with this feature flag enabled. This is how that request compared, and we can compare it with other requests. Like, there is so much visibility and power we can get, but no, we're doing Istio because network level. Sorry, Andy, I went on an aside, but yeah, any dashboard and separate releases from deploys. And I'm trying to remember who wrote a lot on this topic. I'm sure Charity Majors wrote a lot, but there was somebody else and my memory is failing me. Sorry.
All right, we'll share that in the Zoom, and we'll bring that up.
So
the last question was actually not for somebody in office hours, but it was, I thought, a interesting question nonetheless. She was asking, does anyone know tools that auto-generate documentation, specifically graphs for Terraform or Azure? I'm interested in this for a couple of reasons. One is that, well, GitHub just announced support for mermaid diagrams. So I think it'd be pretty cool to generate graphs of Terraform to mermaid. And then this was one tool shared by RB on our team. Haven't used it. Was just curious what else everyone has seen floating around. Has anyone tried this and had less than positive results? Or had wonderful results?
I never had any good results with automatically generated diagrams. Diagrams are documentation. Documentation is useless without context. Like AWS, right on the screen now, there's AWS underline instance dot front. What's that? Like,
right.
Good news is that most of these tools tend to generate the same dot files, in some manner. Even like if you're using like the Python, diagram as code, I think it's called diagrams literally. It's still producing the same backend dot files, just using a bunch of extra special.
So the way that I approach this problem is I do a Terraform graph, and then I edit that dot file down to the level that's understandable to me, and rewrite things, change the colors, and then I give that to somebody as an explanation of what's happening.
This is a way of kind of short-circuiting the process, but still manual.
Well, I can use some of the labels from the Terraform code if I do that, right? Like what things are called. I can not have to write that.
Anyone who's used Terraform has generated a graph like diagram out of some infrastructure and just literally laughed out loud at the enormity of what they were looking at.
Oh yeah.
Immediately decided then and there that they didn't want to have a lookup module for anything ever again. So.
Well, I mean, I was tasked with doing documentation, and there was a very simple mermaid of what the infrastructure was like, and then I looked at the graph, and it's like, okay, so the mermaid shows 3 things, and the Terraform graph shows 300. There must be some middle ground of something that we can understand and something that reflects what Terraform's actually doing.
Yeah.
Just read the HCL. You'll be fine. You'll understand it all.
See if I can pull this up. So one of the nice things Spacelift does is it will automatically generate a graph. But to your point, like, when you have too much stuff deployed, it's just, too hard to visualize it anyways. Like, look at all these edges here just coming out of here. So it's got to be drilled down.
It's beautiful. Until you have to like find
Here's
something.
the thing, like it seems to me like you almost need something that starts with a few root nodes, right? And that you can explore around a bit. If you expand it, it shows the connections at one deeper level, so that you're not overwhelmed, but you can actually because everyone understands that stuff differently, right? That's what's difficult, is that you typically want to go from a top-down approach. Different people will want to go to different depths of detail.
Eric, I
Yeah.
just linked in the Zoom chat to icepanel.io. They have a really nice demo, and I think they are the leading edge on automated diagrams. I am still not sold on it because diagrams need business context and they need to be built for the audience. Like, in my view, there's no automatic way of doing it, but icepanel is doing some nice things there. I don't think it's
I
gonna
dig
work,
this
but it's nice.
immediately though, how they're showing that you're drilling down into things. And this has always been my problem doing diagrams. It's like you need the sufficient detail at certain levels and then to be able to drill into it. So that's cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I want to check that
Yeah,
out.
like they have some business intent here, which is what is desperately missing from all diagrams. Like, yeah, I have a front-end server for app one. What is that app doing? Why does it matter?
Can I create a dot file?
tries to add that. Sure, create some files, create some things, and then you don't have automatic diagrams anymore. It's like automatic comments for your code. Yeah, you can generate them, they're useless. There's that meme of a stop sign with a programmer comment on top of it. This is a stop sign. That's how I see most automated diagrams. For the record, I just played with icepanel a weekend or something like that. I haven't deployed it professionally,
Yeah.
but some of their ideas are really, really interesting, and I think they're delivering on that.
Does it support any importing of environments like cloud integrations or?
Yes, but I don't know which ones.
Mhm.
Because I deployed it on something. I don't know. I don't remember if it was Terraform or something else. I'm so sorry.
All right, I'll check that out some more. Good tip. Any last thoughts on diagramming before we wrap things up for today?
Don't let your architect leave without doing it.
I missed that. One more time.
Don't let your architect leave
Oh,
without
before
actually providing a diagram, because this is the case that I was in, right? We have this very simple diagram, and then we had this contractor that worked on Terraform for 2 years.
Yeah.
And didn't provide any documentation. So the documentation was the Terraform code.
Yeah, no, I believe that happens. So I think that's a larger conversation that we should probably have in a subsequent week, is how to enforce consistent documentation from developers when you know, new things are developed, or existing things are updated. Well, thanks everyone. What was that, Ralph?
No, it was Vlad. Edit it
Oh,
as a
Vlad.
topic so we don't forget, and both documentation and diagrams, because there are a lot of practices and patterns that we can discuss, and I think that's going to be really interesting.
Cool. Yeah, let's do that. Andy, can you make a note of that? Help remind me.
Yes.
Cool. Well, thanks everyone. I really enjoyed our conversation today. Got a lot out of it. If you haven't yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, head over to youtube.com/cloudposse and subscribe. Also connect with me on LinkedIn. Go to linkedin.com/in/Osterman. I always love to connect with everyone in our community here. And if you want to register for next week's office hours, head over to cloudposse.com/office-hours. Again, that's office hours. We host these calls every week, and we'd love to talk to you in real time next week. If you'd like to work with Cloud Posse, check out cloudposse.com/quiz, and we will set up a meeting with you and see if we're a fit. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.